All right, welcome back. So I went back through and just did a little cleaning of the house on these windows. They're not perfect by any means, but they are a little more symmetrical and balanced on the lighthouse. And I also added just this shape just now. It's not quite done, but I'm adding kind of a shadow that's going to cast below this piece right here. And I just added a rounded rectangle right now, and then I'm going to just kind of turn up like this. And then we can use either a gradient or some opacity just to set this back in such a way that it looks like a shadow is being cast. So probably go with the gradient routes because at that point I can control one side being actual color, the other side being a opacity of 0. So I'll go back and make this that gradient that we were using before, probably more of the darker shade, and come up and edit that gradient to be what we're after. So I'm going to scoop this down to be right there. Below it, I'm going to move this up to the very bottom, but that light color I'm actually going to do away with and make the opacity all the way down to nothing. So then we are left with a dark color to no color. And that way you can kind of mess with how this is going to interact. That creates a shadow of sorts. It makes it a little less 2D, which is okay, but in my mind, it's kind of needs to cast that shadow. So let's see if we can maybe refine that a bit. I don't know if the opacities are doing it justice. Maybe we'll do something like that. Or even decrease the size of the shape some. And then skew it up a bit, kind of do the rounded take we've been doing on everything. We'll do that, maybe decrease the opacity. Yeah, that looks a little better. So it's still kind of a 2D look, but it's got that bevel, which is kind of what will give it a little more presence and believability. Okay, so with our lighthouse intact, I'll go ahead and group everything. I'm just gonna select everything I have on the document and get it all selected and hit Command G. All that being said, I did lock the background layer, as you can see in the layers palette. That just makes it easier to move about and not have that move off the canvas in any which way we don't want it to. So next, let's think about the scenery and the setting for this. We want a base flat start to the image, but we want some depth to it too. So the mountain ranges behind the scenes are going to be what kind of give it more depth here. This is the original reference, by the way. So this is ours as it stands. We've got more windows and stuff on this one, which is okay. And this is kind of a more straight lighthouse as opposed to my original curved look here. But I like this. One thing I might tweak that I'm already seeing I'm not loving 100% is this background. And I'm sorry if I'm going all over the place, but this just kind of helps set the mood and tone of the image. And I have some noise on that too. It's not a lot, but we might increase that later as we round out this little series. Okay, so let's create the mountains. I think I want to create 3. 2 are going to be visible. There's going to be one that's kind of clipped on the left side just to give it some more perspective. And I'll modify the top point of this triangle to be a little bit increased to maybe just a bit. 54 or 5, something like that. And we'll increase this shape to be pretty big because this one's going to be the closest, but it'll be way off in the distance. So we want it back in the back, but not all the way in the back. And we'll grab shape we were using, this one, this color palette, I should say, and we'll have to tweak the gradient to match what we're after. This is going to have the darkest edge to this left edge. And then we'll kind of go down to the right of the triangle, bottom right. It's going to be a 2-shape process though, so we need to create another triangle. It's going to be a thinner one. That's going to be pretty long, but it's going to be the left edge of this other triangle. So to give you some idea, I'll do something like this. And we actually probably need to convert to curves to get this to work the way we want, but it's going to come up and touch the edge of that, come way over here, and then along the edge here, And we create another triangle there, but this needs to be a lighter shade. So let's go with something like so. And it's a gradient as well, so we can contour it the way we want. The white's going to be towards the end and the gray towards the top. We can kind of make this a little bit longer. And as I look at this, I feel like it's leaning a little too far. So I'm going to modify it. You can just grab this point, come to that edge, and then we'll group those for now and scooch it over just a tad. And it needs to be even bigger, I think. And go right about there in the image, I think. It'll look okay. And then we can duplicate the process basically, but we're going to just modify the shape of the triangles. So there's going to be one more in the background, but we'll want that one to scoop backwards instead of forwards. So we'll bring the top point here and do the same thing with this shape. We'll need to tweak the gradient on this one to match the lighting a little better too. So we'll bring this in. Background's still giving me trouble. I think I want to make it a little less green. Add some blue back. You know what? I'm going to be bugging on this for a long time, so I'm just going to come over to this one and hit Command C. In fact, I'll just paste the shape. How about that? So for grins, I'll add this swatch to this library just so you guys have access to it. That's just going to save me time, so I'm not going crazy here. This one's actually a little too big now that I look at it, and then this could be even bigger. We'll get our proportions right, which just takes a little bit. And I'm going to decrease the span of this triangle to come in some. Don't need it to be quite near as much. And this gradient will change, I think, to be more top driven of the shadow, so we'll kind of move everything over and modify that some. Oops. There we go. And then finally we have one more that's going to span just this left edge, and we'll probably create this shape to be a little bigger than it is, just to give some scale. And it's going to grow in size just a bit. I think the lighthouse needs to come over just a tad. Digging that. So we've got that taken care of. I think the gradient here is a little off too, so maybe we'll do the same take on moving this over and modifying that. Okay, so eventually there'll be stuff in the way to where we can't see the base of the mountains. There'll be actual houses and stuff here, so we'll get into that a little bit later. I think this overall needs to increase in size though. So we've got that. Now we can add some clouds, and these can be pretty free-formed. You can start with a cloud shape even if you want. So we can start there and just work our way from it. Obviously it's going to have too many radiuses, or what they call bubbles here. So I'm going to just go down to the minimum and just convert it to curves. And then we'll kind of just point and click and make this thing look like we think it should. And I want these to be pretty wispy, so that nothing like super, I don't know what the term would be, but just nothing super perfect. Just kind of want them to wisp through the scene but still be present. We'll go with this color scheme. Maybe this one, and then just toy down the opacity some. They'll blend into the sky and it'll kind of look green, which is what we're after. And so I had one up here that I can remember, and one that was over top of everything, actually on the lighthouse for a bit. And decrease the opacity on that. Just, it needs to be present but not completely. And I feel like this background, the gradient is too perfect. I'm going to increase it just a little bit. And I'm going to make the bottom of this cloud as straight as I can, and the top will be more of the bubbly shapes. And let's go and add some noise to these too. So I'll go to the color palette, add a bunch of noise to both sides. These already have some, but not a lot that's noticeable. There we go. And it looks like the opacity came back on this one. So when I come back and go down to 50, this could probably come down some, maybe 80. Okay. So next, let's get the foundation in play. So we'll get the bottom shape, and that's going to look a lot like just a flat square that goes across the screen. It's going to butt up against everything when we're done and be this dark purplish color. In fact, I forgot to include that one too, so I'm going to grab that. And I'll include that in the other file like this. And I'll include that color palette swatch as well, so you guys have access to that. Great. So I feel like the proportions of this lighthouse is a little smaller than the first that I made. So at the bottom, it scales out a little further, and I feel like it still should. So I might actually increase everything a little bit more. It's going to mean more work, but it's going to look better. So bear with me here. Okay, so I think that's a little more believable. The lighthouse obviously wouldn't be sitting on this water that's coming across the way here, but it is there now. So we have some ground. The clouds and everything are in order, and we'll probably go from there. I think we're definitely setting the scene. Everything's looking good. This mountain might need to be a little smaller, and maybe it's a little too far back still. You could tweak this to your heart's content. That's the beautiful thing about it all. But I'm going to leave it as is, and then in the next video we'll start working on the houses and the plants and trees that we'll see in the original image, and then we'll add some effects to make the lighting and everything appear as it should off of the lighthouse. So I'll see you in that one.